Imagine walking into your bank. You tell the manager you're struggling to make your loan payment because fertilizer costs have exploded, fuel is through the roof, interest rates are crushing you, and Ottawa keeps piling on new regulations. Now imagine that same bank manager tells you to tighten your belt, then heads off for another business class flight, orders filet mignon for dinner, hosts a $44,000 cocktail party, racks up hundreds of thousands of dollars in luxury expenses, forgets to pay her corporate credit card bill, and then when asked who her greatest role model is, she says Fidel Castro. No, seriously. You know, the communist dictator who once imprisoned journalists, crushed dissent, jailed political opponents, and turned Cuba into one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. If that sounds too outrageous to be true, every part of it comes directly from government records obtained through access to information requests. And that's why we've launched firejustine.ca to fire Farm Credit Canada CEO Justine Hendricks. Farm Credit Canada describes itself as being 100% invested in Canadian agriculture and food, although it seems 100% invested in the luxury lifestyle of its CEO. The government agriculture bank's job is to help Canadian farmers succeed by providing financing, business advice, and support through good times and bad. It's the Farmers' Federal Bank. It's an important institution, especially on the prairies. Canadian farmers depend on it. Canadian taxpayers fund it, which makes the conduct of its CEO, Justine Hendricks, all the more astonishing. Let's start with the comments that shook even employees inside Farm Credit Canada. During an internal Ask Me Anything session, staff asked Hendricks a simple question. Who has been your biggest role model? She's a banker, remember. She replied that people might be surprised by her answer, and they certainly were. She said, I've admired his courage. Believe it or not, it's Fidel Castro. She went on to praise Castro for sticking to his values and spoke admiringly about how communist Cuba prioritized food and healthcare. She even praised the country's resilience despite decades of hardship. Sure, Cuba prioritized food, but people are starving. And these weren't anonymous rumors. A transcript of the meeting was leaked and then later confirmed by Farm Credit Canada itself after being tabled in Parliament. Think about that. The head of a Canadian crown corporation that exists to serve farmers chose a communist dictator as her personal role model. And this isn't just a historical disagreement. According to Human Rights Watch, Cuba continues to imprison political opponents, suppress free speech, torture detainees, and maintain hundreds of political prisoners. Food shortages, medicine shortages, and rolling blackouts remain commonplace, while millions of Cubans have fled the country. It's the regime Justine Hendricks said she admired for its courage. If that alone doesn't disqualify someone from leading a crown corporation, what does? But friends, that's just the beginning. While telling employees to control costs, while reminding staff there was a budget to manage, while saying everyone had to tighten their belts, she was living by a very different set of rules. Access to information records obtained by Blacklock's reporter show Hendricks quadrupled the expenses of her predecessor. In less than 3 years, she billed more than $422,000 in travel and hospitality expenses. Business class flights to Europe and Asia, luxury hotels across Canada, repeated filet mignon dinners, an unexplained bar tab for olives and popcorn, a $543 Uber ride from Edmonton to Calgary, an elbows up t-shirt billed to taxpayers, imagine that, a clothes steamer because she needed to freshen up before filming, a hockey jersey for speaking engagements, 9 days of airport parking while flying business class to Singapore, and perhaps the most incredible of all, her corporate Visa card was suspended. Not because it was lost, not because it was stolen, but because she failed to make the minimum payment. Internal emails show Farm Credit bookkeepers scrambling to understand why the CEO's government-issued credit card had gone delinquent. Managers questioned missing receipts. They questioned incomplete expense claims. They warned that some charges might not survive an audit. The records show late fees and interest charges piling up because the CEO wasn't processing her own expenses on time. Imagine missing a $12 minimum payment on your personal Visa. Now imagine doing it with a taxpayer-funded corporate card while earning $458,000 a year. Then there's the cocktail party. In 2023, the federal government ordered departments and crown corporations to cut travel spending by 15%. Farm Credit employees complied. Their travel spending dropped by almost 1/4. Oh, but not the CEOs. Instead, Justine Hendricks organized a $44,521 cocktail reception in Quebec City. 19 bottles of wine, Bombay gin, more than $1,300 worth of canapes, luxury hotel rooms, business class airfare. When employees later asked whether executive travel would finally be reduced, Hendricks' answer to them was blunt, but, honest. No, she said. Now that's not leadership. That's one rule for employees and another one for the executive suite. And there's another question Canadians should be asking here. Why was someone with no agricultural background appointed to run Canada's agricultural lender in the first place? Before Farm Credit Canada, Hendricks worked at Export Development Canada in sustainability. She's a lifelong, well-kept Ottawa bureaucrat. She continued to live in suburban Ottawa while leading a Regina-based crown corporation dedicated to Canadian agriculture. She's an Eastern entitled colonizer. Farmers understand accountability. If they make poor decisions, they don't get a taxpayer bailout. If they overspend, the bank notices. If they miss payments, there are very real consequences. Shouldn't the CEO of Farm Credit Canada be held to at least the same standard as the farmers she's supposed to serve? Farm Credit Canada says it's 100% invested in Canadian agriculture. Canadian farmers deserve to know whether its leadership is equally invested in integrity, accountability, and plain old common sense. Because this isn't about expensive dinners. This isn't about luxury travel either. This isn't even just about admiring Fidel Castro, although that's a biggie. It's about judgment. It's about stewardship. It's about whether the person trusted to lead one of Canada's most important agricultural institutions still deserves that trust. And we don't think she does. If you agree that Farm Credit Canada needs leadership that reflects the values of Canadian farmers, instead of making excuses for communist dictators and living high on the hog like a corporate aristocrat on the public dime, then join us. Visit firejustine.ca today. Sign the petition, share it with your friends, and let's send a message that Canadian farmers deserve far better than Justine Hendricks. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Farm Credit Canada CEO Justine Hendricks is the perfect Ottawa bureaucrat. She's an apologist for Fidel Castro, and she spends like a drunken sailor. The problem is, she's the head of a Regina-based crown corporation meant to serve Canadian farmers. If you think she deserves to be fired, like I do, please go to firejustine.ca.